Hey, welcome. Thanks everyone for joining. We had some technical things to work out, but we're happy you're here. So I'm Adler Archer, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Nwulia. Ivar, I don't know how to say your last name. Is that right?
The end is silent, so you got it right. Yeah.
All right. And yeah, we're glad that you could join for the conversation. So I'm the director of strategy for Neurotech Harbor, and an associate research scientist in biomedical engineering at Johns Hopkins. And so we're just conducting these series so you can get a sense of who's involved in the leadership team at the harbor and with Cinta as well, and kind of learn more about their journey. So Ivar, I'll start with the question that I asked my and I asked Shri this last month, that I asked my MBA students, which is, can you tell me about how your upbringing shapes the way that you navigate challenges at work?
Yes. Thank you for that question. It's very interesting. So I grew up in Nigeria, and back in the days, we were free roving kids. These days we have kids mostly in the house, and but we explored the environment a lot growing up. Between school and when we do our homework, we go out, we build things from trees. We make it was really you know I don't know, it's kind of shaped by the fact that we grew up at a time when there was so much limited resources, so we didn't have toys. So we had to cut down trees, make cars, and then all those things. So I think that's really how I saw my interest forming over time: exploration, curiosity, and how things move, and then creating things.
I like it. And you mentioned three kids. So are you the oldest, the middle, or the youngest?
Yeah, I'm the oldest.
Oldest,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, I'm the fellow oldest child, so I know how that goes. So it sounds like you've always been curious about or interested in building things, creating things. Is that how you got into neurotech, or can you tell me more about your journey, like where you started, what you thought you'd want to be when you were a kid versus how that's turned out?
Yeah, yeah. So interestingly, legend has it that the day I was born, a second cousin of mine saw me in the delivery room and called me doctor, um, which is probably true because my childhood nickname was Doctor, and so somehow I developed that curiosity for medical field. But then, just like I mentioned, we have to make our toys and so forth. Uh, as things evolved, as I grew up, my interest evolved. I mean, it's maintained in the curiosity for the medical profession, but then my interest, evolved into things like electromagnetic physics, which was very exciting to me. Uh, Chemistry, math. I was a runner-up for the math Olympiad at the end of high school. So all of them were equally tempting to me. My interest, vacillated between medicine, physics, engineering. Somehow in the end, medicine won. And that I don't know how that happened, but even after going through medical school, um, my interest in applying my mathematics background, physics background, continued. And so my interest in medicine merged with, you know, with the medical, with an engineering component of it, and that's how I ended up where I am today.
So when you were finishing up high school, did you go straight to university? Was there like a crazy road trip in between, or like how did you choose what you wanted to do as an undergraduate?
Yeah, so it's a very strange system, but most people who have gone through the British system know that. So after high school, you do what I call an A level, which is like a 2-year A level. I did mine in a year, and then so I applied for medical school. So between high school and medical school, which is a 6-year program, is a 1-year gap of advanced level. And the 6 years of medical school includes 3 years of basic medical sciences, and then 3 years of straight clinical medicine. So that's how things came to be for me. So it's a system that most British colonists used back in the days.
Got it. Yeah, I was just in London for the AI summit and it was ridiculously hot. And I guess the British don't believe in air conditioning, so we were just kind of all sweating it out together. How did you end up on the East Coast?
In the United States?
Mhm.
Yes. So I was in UK back then after medical school, completing publication of my first book then, which came out of my medical school research on drug abuse. And visiting that presentation was the program director of psychiatry from Johns Hopkins. And so he listened to my presentation. His name is Glenn Trisman. And they said, hey, look, Eva, you have to come to Hopkins. And so I said, okay, wow, that's nice. I heard so much about Hopkins. It's a great institution, da 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 da. And so I took the U.S. medical licensing exam and got into Johns Hopkins for residency, and that's how I came to the East Coast.
So what got you interested in psychiatry?
Yes, I've always been fascinated about how the brain works. I thought the brain was just, a virgin area. So much unknown, and so much opportunity to make a breakthrough. Always been interested in making a contribution to society, medicine, and I thought psychiatry is one area where ample opportunities exist. Most areas of, most aspects of medicine, have defined, mechanisms. You can, get liver enzymes from the blood, or take a biopsy or study liver disease. And so psychiatry and neurology, those areas where it's almost impossible because it's not ethically possible to take brain biopsy to understand how the brain works. And so I found it very fascinating because it's a very gray, unknown area, an opportunity for people to make breakthrough. And of course, even in spite of stigma, I knew that psychiatric conditions are highly prevalent. And because there's so much unknown, we could make contributions to conditions like that to make it appear or make the field to be at the same level that medicine is now, where we can study how the brain works and applies that to disease definition and classification and find treatments. And that's really it.
And then did you have like role models along the way, or people who, when you were thinking about your specialty, who you saw and kind of observed and thought, I want to be like that person, or I kind of like the way that they practice? And do you feel like there's anyone that kind of shaped the way that you engage with your work now?
Well, not anyone living back then. I remember when I was a kid, I read a lot about William Osler. Those were, selfless physicians that really defined the novelty of the profession. People who put their life at stake, visiting and treating conditions that they didn't know the origin that could have actually affected them if it was infectious. And so I read a lot about William Osler. Was really a strong motivator for me. And then as I evolved into psychiatry, I really enjoyed the works of Henry Phipps, who was a neurologist, and those were the people that shaped my career.
Awesome. It's really interesting. It makes me think, because I guess that's a good distinction between you and Sri, because you're an MD and you see patients, but you're kind of involved in this other space. One of the areas that I do research in is professional identity formation for doctors. So I kind of approach it through a social identity theory. So this idea that in the workplace, we would walk in and see doctors and nurses and patients and family members. So social categorization. Identification is the second piece. So you would walk in and say, I'm a doctor, see these different groups, and then there's social comparison. So how do you, as a doctor, compare to other doctors? And then how do doctors compare to nurses and patients and family members? So I kind of take that lens to get a sense of what doctors feel like they should be doing, what they feel like they shouldn't be doing. So an example I always give is you walk in, I say I'm a doctor, I see a patient kicks over the bin, there's trash everywhere. Do I feel like it's my job as a doctor to clean up the trash, or do I think someone else will do it? Not better or worse, just different person, different job. So if I start cleaning up the trash, how do I feel when I'm doing that? Do I feel like that's what I'm meant to be doing, or I'm doing this because I'm worried someone's going to slip and fall, or some other motivation? So in a lot of ways, I'm studying getting doctors involved in informatics and innovation, but it's kind of similar thing. Like, how do you feel when you're doing some type of work that you might not feel is part of your job, or what people would expect you to be doing? Does it feel like it's the same status? Does it feel like it's equally as important? So I guess that's a long ramble, but the question is kind of, do you feel like when you're doing neurotech or things that are kind of adjacent to actually sitting down with a patient, does it feel like you're still a doctor, or do you feel like it's something else? Do you feel like it's the same status, higher status, lower status? What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, that's a question I've asked myself multiple times, because sometimes I've asked myself, are you still a doctor? But that was in the early beginning. And again, I think you asked me the first question, how my career evolved. And you can see that I actually function at the highest level in everything other than, biology. Physics was at the Math Olympiad, and so forth. So when I was a postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins, I registered at Bloomberg School of Public Health for statistical genetics and biostatistics. During that time, I came across folks from the School of Engineering. One is Nitish Dekar, who is our colleague. That's how I formed that relationship early 2000. They had a lot of EEG data, high dimensional EEG data. So I was interested in helping with, machine learning and so forth, because I was, already in the School of Public Health. So there I was interested in signal processing and so forth. But then there were many times I was taking classes in what would be seen as, electronics or electrical engineering or, signal processing, that I would ask myself then, are you are you deviating so far from the field? But I had a reason, which, became apparent as I, advanced further. I had a reason for that. I never felt that the greatest breakthrough in brain disorders can be made by physicians alone. I felt, more than 20 years ago, even before it became, a common trend, that it will require multiple disciplines working together to solve problems, and that will include people in engineering, people in all disciplines of science and social sciences and health, to come together to resolve, the complexities that have defied, our understanding of brain diseases. And so that was why I found myself doing all these things. Not that I will be an expert in engineering or expert in AI, but just that I can understand what those people do, understand how to do them, and be able to be that rallying person that will unify all these teams. And me, being the physician, I'm almost like a systems engineer. I know the diseases, I know the problems, so I can come up and throw out the challenges. And then people from different backgrounds will work, together to solve it. So deviating into these areas did not worry me as such, because the end goal is to bring together teams that can resolve, challenges that are still, without cure. So that's the way I see, being 1 foot in medicine and 1 foot elsewhere.
Got it. So I wonder then, when you're on these teams and they're different types of professionals, so it sounds like a very interdisciplinary environment. Have you had kind of challenges in translating for them or working with them, or seen other people who have had common challenges, maybe clinicians with technical folks or technical folks with marketing folks? Are there things that stand out in your mind that you see that happen a lot in that space?
Yeah, I think understanding their language and challenge came about because I took courses with these people, right? So there's always a challenge if you're not in the health field, of understanding a health condition, or even challenges to implementing or adopting those health conditions. So you can make the fanciest and most innovative product that patients will not use, because it's kind of unnatural for patients to use them, or there are some, social circumstances or cultural problems that make it almost impractical for them to use this. So I see those, and I see the frustration of, technologists when we tell them that this is a great innovation, but it won't work. And the other way around, I train as a physician, so I can come to them with the concepts of how engineers see things. So yeah, I do see that, but being able to work or train with these people during my formative years prepared me to address some of those, concerns or difficulties, and make that interpretation and connection.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm curious, just thinking about like the practice of medicine versus in Nigeria versus the UK versus the US. Are there different distinctions that stand out as pretty primary to you in the way the systems operate?
Yes, the systems operate differently, the level of technology. So most clinical decision making, most treatment or medical, the medical field in Nigeria, most management is made by just, intuition, clinical judgment, and less of technology, just because, the resources are not easily available as it is here. Whereas in the US, there is more of, investigations. MRIs are easily available, CT scans are easily available. Whereas the neurologist in Nigeria, is looking at clinical signs of stroke to make that determination. And so it's really at that level of technology. But in terms of the foundation knowledge, that is the basic science, the basic medicine, they are probably quite similar. And of course, the healthcare management reimbursement systems are different, whereas people have to pay from pocket. In Nigeria and most African countries, we have insurance programs here, platforms here.
Oh, so we've talked about medicine, physics, engineering as areas you're interested in, but I also wonder about the role or the identity of entrepreneur and kind of how you got into the space of building businesses and doing things that are kind of outside of the hospital setting.
Yes. So how I got into entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial path is again born out of necessity. I was very interested from Hopkins. I was very interested in contributing to minority institutions, um, but I was trained in a setting with a strong pedigree, with a strong infrastructure, and so I was going to take a huge loss in terms of infrastructure to do things. But again, at the time I was completing my neuroscience training or my postdoctoral training, I lost my grandfather um, from complications of dementia. And so I became very fascinated in developing, understanding, the how the disease mechanism, and then developing interventions. Um, I felt that we could contribute towards modifying the disease rather than treating symptoms, which is the practice even till now. So modifying the disease will, require us to identify it very early before substantial brain loss, and then changing the course of, disease pathology early on. And so I moved to Howard University then, and developed a product, an idea and a prototype. Um, and that was me using my basic, basic knowledge. At that time, the only programs I can write were Perl, and maybe Python. And so that's the level of my work, putting together a system. Um, I didn't have that much resource to develop that into a very strong working prototype. And the also having teams that were readily available for me while I was at Hopkins it was also missing. So so then I started thinking about how to overcome all those problems, and then read about how to form a company. I read about how to source for funding, and then I took a huge leap of faith, taking my personal funds to initiate this and build the first prototype, before I started receiving funding. And it grew up. I mean, this actually expanded because I also found out that a lot of people from my background do not have easy access to funding, and so so we have to do a lot more of creativity to get funds going to move this idea. So it was from there I started taking courses like innovator boot camps, reimbursement courses, free and paid for, and over time, my entrepreneurial, aspects increased. And of course, I can, tell you I'm not an entrepreneur. I have no MBA or anything, in business development. But my initial, education and training and attempts to know more brought me into contact with people who were in probably the final year of their master's degree in business administration, and when I pitched the idea of my products and so forth, people were compelled to come and start working with me even without pay in the beginning. And so I was blessed to have, 2 or 3 MBAs working with me part-time, full-time, without even, without much funds. And so that's how these people, began to expand my knowledge and reach in the entrepreneurial aspects of starting a new company.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking about, kind of, we were discussing your upbringing and this idea that curiosity was a big part of it. And then we talked about wanting to solve problems and wanting to explore. And those kind of seem like key success metrics for entrepreneurs. And so I wonder if there's certain characteristics for other people who are kind of in the same path of trying to have this idea that they want to build out. Are there certain things that you think made you more successful, or that you could advise people around when they're thinking about starting a business or growing a business?
Yeah, I think curiosity is there, but I think the basic humility to learn from everyone, regardless of their background, was something that I got inculcated in me from my grandparents, really, to to be humble enough to receive criticisms, advice, and so forth. I would tell you that when we were initially developing our prototype, I have an idea of what the patients needed, but I wasn't scared to ask to involve the patients in every step of it, and I wasn't scared to hear your product sucks. Like I want that feedback early on. So if it doesn't work, we fail there, and then we think of something else. But I think people should be open to receiving that very early, not late. And that's one area that I found very important in success, for the success of anything, but in business, in the neurotech or innovation period. You have to have that spirit. And the other thing is never to give up, because we've gone through spells, in the beginning when it was almost impossible. It looked, bleak, quite bleak. That even though we have a good product and vision of what the product will do, the funds were not coming. And so I thought of, quitting and doing practice. I could earn big time money. I trained as an interventional neuropsychiatrist. So we make money from procedures like TMS, deep brain stimulation, and so forth. But I was able to persist, and endure that, big, challenge and continue. And that's one of the reasons why I was interested in this Neurotech harbor, because there were just a lot of people may have dreams that just die away because they don't have that ability to persist in the face of challenges like this.
Yeah, as you're talking about your entrepreneurial journey, it makes me think about how kind of this idea of, as you're saying, persisting, but being able to be part of community. Because I've talked to a lot of people, I'm an entrepreneur as well, so I've kind of gone through this too, where it feels very lonely. Like you've kind of got this vision you're trying to build out, and maybe people don't believe in you, or maybe you don't have a support system. And just kind of thinking about that theme of persisting. Are there practical tips that you can give people who might feel like they're in that situation of they have this idea, they're trying to keep moving forward with it, but at the same time feeling like, kind of like you mentioned, there are other things you could be doing full time that would pay you more, or maybe there are other ways that you could be spending your time? Are there resources or books or groups that you found helpful?
Yeah, I mean, there are books to read, but books are just really I wouldn't say vain. They just tell you things, in theories, and they probably will give you case examples and so forth. But I think the best thing is to reach out to people um, and get advice. I remember when I applied for my first, R01 grant application, and I got the summary statement, and I read the first three, reviewer critics. I thought that was the end of life. I mean, it was the most demoralizing things, that I could think of that I've ever had. Like, how you write a project, you have so much ideas of that this project is good. You have your, preliminary work. And so you're the best, cheerleader of your grant application. And then here you are, you see reviews telling you, this is bad, this is bad, this is very, very bad, and this is terrible. And so I just, I thought research is not, for me, until my chair asked me, to show him the summary statement. And they read the summary statement. I said, wow, this is really, really good. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, oh yeah, they like your project. There are some weaknesses here and there. So the point I'm trying to make is that I've read, about grant review process and so forth. But when I saw my first pink slip, it didn't, everything, fell out of the window. But it took, talking to somebody else to give me that reassurance that this is good. Don't give up, try again. And so I think, being networking with people, looking for people with similar backgrounds or so, and who have more experiences in this area will be very useful for everyone. And that's one of the reasons why, I particularly got interested in our Equitech mission, the Neurotech Harbor, because I'm kind of a living example for a lot of folks who may have challenges in resources and so forth, like I do. But I also have the experience, from the academic aspects of it, because that's where I came from, where entrepreneurial limitations, marketing, and so forth are the weaknesses. And from the entrepreneurial side, where getting technical expertise from from institutions and access to clinical populations is a challenge. So I'm able to offer assistance, advice, and so forth. I think that's what helped me when I was going through this early challenge of getting funding from my business, for my prototype. I met with a gentleman who is the CEO of a company called Imoca. It's an offshoot of Johns Hopkins tech system. And he kind of nudged me through the right direction to get funding. And had I not, reached out or met him, it would have been, lost cause. So I think that networking and being able to networking with people to get advice from people who have had that kind of lived experience with the challenges you're having, may be the best way of all things you just mentioned.
You so earlier on in the conversation, you mentioned trouble accessing funding for someone from your background. Can you say more about that? Like what you mean by background, or if there's specific considerations that you think were being made? Could you elaborate on that?
I mean, it's not it's not news that people from some ethnic groups are less represented in grant fundings and in the medical or technological industry. And so there are multifactorial reasons for that, which we cannot, we cannot delve into at this time. But regardless of what the factors are, we know that if you are from a minority institution, infrastructure and resource may be, particularly challenging. And what I have seen, from my trips to some HBCUs and some institutions that are part of the research centers for minority institutions, is that people have very, very creative ideas. Even in drawing, but then what is needed to carry it to a formal prototype or taking the prototype to to a product is not there. And so even putting together a competitive grant becomes challenging, not because you have no innovative idea or you can't do it, but just because you don't have the resources needed to put together a very, very, compelling application. And so I suffered that problem. And so, and so it's hard to get funding if you are required to provide more evidence or more support for your product, but you don't have the resource to take the idea to de-risk some of the problems, well enough in order to get fund. So having multiple, gaps that require de-risking to make it compelling to get fund was the biggest problem I had. And it's unfortunately a bigger problem is similar problems from people who from similar resource challenge institutions, more resource challenge institutions, and so that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's interesting because I think about cultural competency. I think you've touched on that a few times, and and around people feeling comfortable in certain spaces or feeling invited to participate. And I'm thinking about just a thing I'm kind of noodling on for myself. So I was on active duty in the military from 2000 to 2004, and then I kind of got into engineering and other stuff. And I was really lucky to have advocates along the way. And I think you've kind of mentioned that too. And one of the things we're trying to do at Hopkins is recruit more veterans to come and do their undergraduate work. But a lot of people assume they're not welcomed here, they wouldn't qualify, or they wouldn't get in. And so that's something I've been thinking a lot about, is how do I help broadcast the message that we want more veterans to apply, or we want more people from underrepresented groups to apply. And so I just trying to think about how to formulate the question. I think part of it kind of relates to this idea of cultural competency with the groups that you're trying to include, or tips for kind of working with people or including people who maybe come from a different background. Do you have any examples of that, or strategies or tools for doing that?
There's no straightforward tool, to be honest with you. Even me, people have told me from my institution that I don't have the same shared experience as they do, because I came in from Hopkins with a strong pedigree. A lot of people advocating for me. But I will tell you that trying to recruit people, there are a lot of unknowns, right? And some of them are probably genuine, because I do mentor students in Saul Snyder Neuroscience Center, and one of the two other neuroscience centers at Hopkins. And what I hear from a lot of people from minority descent there is that they feel like their challenges or problems is different from that of their other colleagues. They have more, social, challenges, meeting financial needs and so forth. So at that level of postdoctoral, so it exists. So the point I'm trying to make is that when you now come to undergrads and in minority institutions, and you tell them, hey, there is this program we have at so and so, university is really good. It will, create opportunity for you after that to have, great job and so forth. They wonder whether there will be, whether their problems will be felt and addressed, will be comprehended, because it's hard to comprehend some things, like some people, frankly, you can give them scholarship, but that they need more resource than that. So would people comprehend that? Will the professors there be hostile to me? Will I be accepted? Uh, and some of those may be, extreme, but some of them from my interaction with postdocs and, are true. Like some people feel like they are lonely or outside of their teams, and it's not because, the directors of these programs are not doing anything to help with that. I mean, that's why I'm heavily engaged, in mentoring these teams. But just for you to know that there's a lot of concerns, uncertainties of whether they will thrive, if they go to this new environment, whether their problems will be identified. So that may be a challenge to recruiting these people to go, because people want to work and train where they feel like they are not alone, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I could probably keep asking you questions, but I know we've got some guests, so I want to take a break and see if others have questions they want to share.
Thank you.
If you want to put something in the chat, we can read it out as well.
Yeah, so I have a question for the Blueprint MedTech. What's been some surprises or positive and negative challenges with helping running this?
Okay. This to me, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So the Blueprint MedTech, the positives have been that we have, two groups, from the Neurotech Harbor and Cinta group that, seem to hit off the relationship in a very powerful, good note. It's extraordinary because I've worked many years in collaborations, and I haven't seen anything like this where, the two groups, hit it off, in a very, very, harmonic, amicable and cordial way. And teams have seemed to go in line in terms of the timelines as planned. So there's so much in terms of positive, and we've seen, a lot of very good applications. I thought the first year that we will, because we just started off and sent off the solicitation quickly. I feared that we will have very few applicants, but we had a good number of applications to review. And a good number of very high quality applications too. But again, unsurprisingly, there were a lot of applications that have gaps here or there. that could be, de-risked, and potentially could, fall back into the realm of, stronger applications. And so what we're doing is the seedling program, which is a program that, I am directing. This program, helps, identify those teams that have, some gap areas in the application. Typically, gap areas could be in the areas of regulatory, project details, team expertise, scope of work, and diversity. And so what we're doing is trying to develop mentorship, experts, education, and other resources to help them improve on that. On those areas of gap, to de-risk those areas and then make them, reapply. So there's so much positives, and even, what we'll consider as a negative is something that we are, we found, equally rewarding. That means helping people who have, challenges in the application to improve upon their application next time in a cycle. Other than that, I will defer any other negatives to other speakers next time. Thank you.
I think, as you mentioned, Ibar, this seedling program that you now have, designed and direct. This is the first year or the first cycle that we're getting experience with this program, but it does formally target some of the issues that you raised in terms of mentoring and addressing gaps and de-risking. So I think that, as you mentioned, this is a wonderful opportunity to explore how best to formalize these interventions and yet individualize what's needed by the various teams. So I look forward to learning from this experience with you and others.
Thank you.
We have a question from Dan about kind of the advice you gave earlier about keeping a thick skin when you get feedback that might be a little bit, that might have a sting to it, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I think the Seedling is one platform where you get that, support, that mentorship, that advice, that education. But thick skin, thick skin is thick skin. Really, it's you want to speak with, talk with more people. And we're very, very open, quite frankly. You can, outside of the Seedling, you can request to talk with any of your team members. And I, particular, have, time to chat with people who maybe demoralized by feedback or so, because you can't be more demoralized than I was somewhere back 8 years ago. And if I can do it, you can do it, even better.
There's also a question about the role that Howard will be playing in the blueprint. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yes, so Howard, we have two PIs from Howard. We helping to implement a very wide outreach that can bring more and more diversity and inclusion into this neurotech space. And Seedling is one of them. We also at Howard developing the another program that will provide avenue for people from diverse background at different levels, from higher education, high schools all the way to college level students, undergrads, giving them, a pipeline into, neurotechnology. And so that program, we are actually working adversely to get approved. Dr. Manaye, Kabatin Manaye, who is a professor of physiology, will be a speaker next time, and she will be talking a lot about this program, this pipeline program. So those are the big things that we'll be doing at Howard as part of the Blueprint MedTech.
I'm just taking a look at the chat.
There's a question about contact information.
Hello.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I think that was
Yeah, my name is Svi Goldenberg. I'm a neuromodulation company in San Diego, and we were accepted to the seedling program, sorry. And I would like to have your contact information because we think that our device will have a major impact on African-American communities. So maybe offline, I can connect with you, talk to you about that, get your advice. That would be great.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm excited for you. Yes, I can send you my my email address, and
that would be great. Thank you.
you're welcome.
And as part of that program, over the next 6 months, you'll have exposure to ongoing exposure to Ivar and his team. So
Yeah.
that's good news.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Throughout the 6 months of the seedling, you will interact with us, very frequently. Our goal is for you to succeed. I mean, that's really our big time objective. I mean, that's our primary goal. Our objective, like I always say, is for technologies to be available to solve human problems. Anything that can, address diseases of interest where the none exist or good one exists, that's our long-term goal. I mean, objective. So we are really invested in your sources, so we can all achieve this this objective.
And back to the deep dive question that was introduced earlier, the deep dive program projects will be assigned or matched with executive mentors that have experience relative to the space that a particular project is targeting. And these folks have decades of experience in the translational space. So mentorship and facilitation is a huge part of this program in all dimensions. And as Ivar mentioned, it's an example of how its funding is not enough. It's a necessary prerequisite, but the wrapping around these other resources and making them available is a primary objective of this program.
absolutely. That's related to the question from Conrad as well about the GATES platform, the guidance and impact tracking system, and whether or not Blueprint will be using that.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, GATES is gospel to us. It's a very, very useful platform. CIMIT developed. It is the the program that all our seedling team members are getting trained on, and the mentors are applying that to help guide the risking process throughout the 6 months. And hopefully, our hope is that this, even after the seedling program, or after the Blueprint MedTech program for the pilot projects, that these teams will continue to use them for for their future developments going forward.
Looks like we're getting close to time. I want to make sure we give space for any other questions before we close out. Right. Thanks everyone for joining. Feel free to email us or get in touch if you have any questions. We're happy to help. And oh, Debbie's got a link in the chat for Gates. Yeah, Gates is great. I actually just applied for another grant and I was begging them to let us use it in that grant too. So I'm so glad we get it for Blue Tech.
Okay. There's a question by Dan Harper for everyone. Do you see that?
Oh yeah. Staying in your seat as our time tries to get the solution out to the market. Yeah, what do you think about that? I think it sounds like maybe the flavor of being able to stay focused
Yes.
on the.
And there's a fine line between staying focused and getting caught in the fire of so many things. I think in spite of the fact, despite the fact that I got training in all these areas, I let the experts do the work, and so I stay focused on the role of guiding the team as a physician and a user and a product owner, if you're going to use the Scrum philosophy in project development. But that's really, I still, so it's a very important question. Stay on the lane as but get wide knowledge so that you'll be able to understand everybody's language, sort of. Well, let people do their work to get there.
All right, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure.
All right.